Let's do this. Before we begin, I just want to give a quick trigger warning. Game of Thrones is a pretty messed up show with a lot of intense scenes that involve violence, nudity, sex, and it might be really overwhelming for some viewers, so from this point onwards, I strongly suggest if you think anything will make you very uncomfortable to either proceed with caution or not proceed at all. I will say I do a pretty good job of cutting anything really intense out of the video, but still, please be wary. And of course, many spoilers ahead. You've been warned. Game of Thrones. What a moment in time. A pop culture phenomenon, if you will. No show has really ever gone through the highest highs and the lowest lows that Game of Thrones has endured. And for these next few videos, we're going to be enduring those highs and those lows. I have granted myself the absolutely psychotic task of not only watching every episode of Game of Thrones, but also giving very vivid detailed summaries of each episode and ranking each episode on a tier list within the span of 4 videos. The story of Game of Thrones is actually based on a series of novels written by George R.R. Martin titled A Song of Ice and Fire. However, Martin has not finished the series, which we'll probably get into more once seasons 6 through 8 come around. Just keep that in mind because the incomplete series affects the show a lot. A Song of Ice and Fire was adapted into the show Game of Thrones by HBO and David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, also known as D&D, who, let's just say, have a bit of a negative reputation, which we'll get into in a later video. With that, the first ever episode of Game of Thrones would air in the United States on April 17th, 2011. The show itself takes place a few years after the aftermath of Robert's Rebellion, which was vaguely caused by Rhaegar Targaryen's motives towards Lyanna Stark, who was promised to Robert Baratheon himself, and it just led to a whole ass show between the Targaryens, Baratheons, and Starks in particular. The conclusion of this war would mark the end of the absolutely dominant Targaryen dynasty and the near extinction of all the Targaryens, which is where the story of Game of Thrones begins. So let's get to the tier list really quickly. Come on in, folks, let me give you a good look at this tier list I have partially made. Shout out to Och Desu, who made this entire thing. So bottom tier is You're My Queen. I mean, if anyone says this to you, it's an insult. If you're at this bottom tier, you're basically season 8. It's editing me. All of the footage I recorded for the tier list got cut off. Basically, I have to re-record all of that. So this is a re-recording. Next tier above You're My Queen is Shame, Shame, Shame. And this is... this tier is slightly better than the worst tier, but it's still like very much bottom tier D material episodes. But then we have the Three-Eyed Raven, Bran the Three-Eyed Raven, which is the middle tier. This is just like the meh tier. Like literally Bran being the Three-Eyed Raven is very meh. Ned's honor, basically anything from here and upwards is like great. Ned's honor is obviously something most people should aspire to. It does backfire at times, but you're still loved and respected by most, and that's what these episodes are. Still good. Then we get to Pod's Magic Rod. Pod's Magic Rod. Obviously, these are some of my faves. They're great, but they just need that little extra inch, if you know what I mean. Then finally, we have A Wedding Party at the Phrase, which is the absolute top tier. I mean, come on. You're never gonna get a dull moment at a wedding party at the Phrase. These episodes are just godlike, essentially. These have to be amazing to be here. So that's the tier list. All right, before we begin, I do want to say I worked very hard with these videos. So a like, a subscribe, a share, a comment, whatever you want to do is always appreciated, very much so. And well, enjoy season 1 and season 2.
You won't be a boy forever. And winter is coming.
Winter is coming. Ned, literally slay my puss down.
Kicking things off, we have the first ever episode of Game of Thrones. How was it, you may ask? I will say most pilot episodes in general are at a disadvantage off the bat, considering just how much has to be introduced in a short amount of time, especially when it comes to the absolute monstrosity regarding the world of Westeros. Apparently there was a lot of struggles with the episode beforehand too, but that being said, the final product could have been a lot worse. As far as first episodes go, this really wasn't that bad at all, and you get a lot of introductions, background of the world of Game of Thrones off the bat. I like that it introduces us to the three major houses that basically this entire show will be revolving around: the Starks in Winterfell, the Lannisters in King's Landing, the Targaryens in wherever the and icon legend Robert Baratheon. You get a glimpse into the Starks specifically and each of their personalities, most notably with Ned being very loyal, honorable, and trustworthy, which basically his entire house is built on. Hopefully that doesn't backfire on them later on. Jon Snow, a very important character, is also introduced as a mere bastard to Ned. The Starks kids get their own direwolves too, which serve as really great foreshadowing tools for each of their journeys in the show.
What is it?
It's ghosts!
Then there's the Lannisters, who are super pompous and arrogant and blonde. However, much like Jon Snow, Tyrion is also a noticeable outcast in his family for being a dwarf and not being an absolute prick. Daenerys, arguably the biggest character in the entire series, is introduced and is a lot more shy and meek than what she becomes later on. Jorah Slaymont is introduced too. I just wanted to throw him in there. And of course, who the can forget the most iconic first 10-ish minutes of the episode where the biggest threat of the show is introduced: the White Walkers.
Jesus! Just, oh my god. Imagine.
Jon Arryn's death also comes up, and a letter pinning the Lannisters as the reason behind it is important in giving Ned reason to go to King's Landing to be Robert's hand of the king and f up his entire family's lives for the rest of the show. And also,
First sign of boobies.
first of many, I may add. All in all, there was a lot introduced to us within an hour, and I do think they did a very good job showing us glimpses of the world and important characters, but I don't know. She was a little slow for me, unfortunately.
The things I do for love.
And so begins.
Psych. The event that catapults the entire story into fruition happens. Bran gets shoved off a ledge, and of course, the incest. That on its own honestly brings an energy to the pilot that low-key influences my opinion on this episode greatly.
Season 1, Episode 1, Winter is Coming, is going to go right at Ned's honor.
I can't stand the wailing of women.
One word.
Episode 2 was low-key kind of good. It was just really entertaining to watch. I do think things are still relatively slow, but at least we are getting a lot of background with the characters and stories being told. We mainly get a bit more of a glimpse into the Lannisters and Daenerys' characters that we didn't really get in the previous episode. For example, Tyrion combats his dwarf label by utilizing his intelligence. Cersei is actually a really caring mother, but still a conniving and Jaime is a king killer and a lot more arrogant than I remember.
We've guarded the kingdoms for 8,000 years.
We already?
Oh my god. I want to punch him in the face.
Daenerys actually gets a lot of story too, with her learning how to make the most of her situation by integrating with the Dothraki culture a bit, and even trying to find ways to make Khal Drogo happy. There's also Robert and Ned's conversation on what to do with Daenerys and the two remaining Targaryens. I think the biggest takeaway from this episode is basically the Starks all being separated. You have Jon heading to the Wall to become part of the Night's Watch, Sansa, Arya, and Ned all going to King's Landing because Ned agreed to be the hand of the king, to the annoyance of Catelyn Stark, who is also really pissed at Jon Snow for existing.
I want you to leave.
Yikes. And of course Ned walks in.
Arguably, there's two really big climaxes this episode. The first being an attempted murder on Bran's life, and Catelyn Stark literally being the baddest girl boss in the history of girl bosses and saving his life.
Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god.
This does lead her to also leave Winterfell to tell Ned about her suspicions, about the Lannisters potentially being involved in Bran's near-death experience. The ending is also a pretty big moment with Arya disarming Joffrey in a sword fight, which then leads to Lymeria biting him, which then leads to an argument between the royal family and Ned, Sansa, and Arya, which all ends up leading to Sansa's direwolf lady being killed by Ned himself, and Bran randomly waking up from his potential deadly coma. Yeah, pretty good episode.
Season 1, episode 2, honestly, it was pretty good. I'm gonna put it in Pod's Magic Rod, why not?
Kicking off episode 3, the Starks arrive at King's Landing, and things between Sansa, Arya, and Ned are a bit shaky.
War was easier than daughters.
What a mess.
Arya and Sansa hate each other, and Ned doesn't know how to handle his own daughters. I will say though, there's a very sweet and great relationship building moment between Arya and Ned where they talk about the dangers of King's Landing and how basically the Starks gotta stick together, and it was just a really sweet moment. I love their father-daughter relationship this entire episode. Ned getting Arya Serial Pharrell from Bravos to teach her about sword dancing is so pure. Then there's the last few bittersweet moments of Ned and Kat getting one last moment together, and you can tell they truly love each other. This is another very big episode with relationship building between the Starks, which is always welcome. Now that being said though, I'm so excited to be in King's Landing. I'm just gonna say straight up, any episodes that revolve heavily around King's Landing is literally gonna eat. This episode started with a goddamn bang because we get introduced to the King's Small Council, specifically Renly Baratheon, Maester Pycelle, and unapologetically the two best characters in the entire show, Lord Varys and Littlefinger.
Oh, yes. Yes.
I just cannot put into words how much these two men absolutely carried the first few seasons of the show. I love that the writers really wasted no time in showing their intelligence and brilliance, with Varys showing off his connections and Littlefinger just being a super persuasive and cunning getting on Kat's and Ned's good side, which definitely will not bite them in the later on.
He's like a little brother to me, Ned. He would never betray my trust.
I don't know about that.
Sir Barristan is introduced too in a really bizarre convo between Robert and Jaime about their first kills, with the burn them all line being used for the first time, which kind of ate Daenerys, and the Dothraki storyline is also very strong here. I love seeing Daenerys start to show signs of a very selfless and humble leader, attempting to integrate in Dothraki culture and just all around being very respectful to the culture, which her brother definitely does not do. Also, she becomes preggers at the end, which is exciting to everyone apart from Jorah, who acted a bit suspicious, to be honest. I wonder why. The other half of the episode is a little bit slow for me, however. The Night's Watch is not really super captivating for me, or at least for the first season, and I also found the Uncle Benjen subplot to be pretty boring. I think the other Watchmen not vibing with Jon at first, then near the end having them all find a mutual respect for each other is cute, and of course Jon's and Tyrion's short-lived bromance was nice as well. For the most part, I just think the Night's Watch dragged this episode down a bit for me. Lots of character and relationship building, which is always appreciated.
Season 1, episode 3 is gonna go ahead of episode 1 in Ned's honor still.
Cripples, Bastards, and Broken Things did not have to go off as hard as it did.
There was one phrase he kept repeating. The seed is strong, I think it was.
I genuinely enjoyed Ned's detective work this episode. It was engaging as fuck, and seeing Genjin for the first time and being revealed as Robert's bastard, one of many I'm sure, had me all giddy, and like Ned was slowly but surely piecing together one huge puzzle that resulted in the death of Jon Arryn. Also, his and Cersei's quick spar near the end was simply iconic.
I was also trained to kill my enemies, Your Grace.
As was I.
Ooh, she low-key kinda ate that though. Ned, you need to get the out of King's Landing.
Damn well, Tarly is introduced in the story, and yes, just just yes. He just adds such an interesting dynamic to the Night's Watch men and to John's story arc as well, because he's just so different and adds a much needed light to the dreariness of the Watch and to John's life. I forgot how amazing his and Sam's friendship was the first few seasons, and seeing it all come back was just really enjoyable. I was just very impressed with the Night's Watch segments this episode overall. Littlefinger manipulating the hell out of Ned is always a joy to see. Him giving Ned and the audience more details on the usage of spies was actually really interesting. Daenerys finally standing up to Viserys, realizing the power she has being a Khaleesi is just perfect.
I hate his ass.
The definite standout moments this episode, though, are actually the first and final moments. It's actually a really nice juxtaposition, too, regarding Tyrion's standings with the Starks. Tyrion literally starts out by giving Bran a gift and getting into good graces with one half of the Stark family, only to be taken hostage by Catelyn Stark at the end. For the record, as much as Cat this up, damn, was Tyrion's capture a cool scene. We also get a bit of insight regarding the tale of the Mountain and the Hound, which basically explains how Gregor was the reasoning behind Sandor's up face. This honestly was such a good episode for some reason. I just really enjoyed this a lot. We're just really finally starting to get things moving plot-wise.
Cripples, Bastards, and Broken Things, I actually really enjoyed. I'm gonna put it at the front of Ned's honor.
We're gonna multitask here, and I hope you all enjoy.
It's looking like the episodes are just getting better and better from here on out. So much happens this episode, and I absolutely love it. Ned keeps on digging for the reason behind Jon Arryn's death, but Laius, of all people, comes up to warn him about the dangerous territory he's walking over right now, and that the king's life is in danger, and even subtly hints at Ned's life being on the line as well.
Why kill him?
He started asking questions.
Oh.
We get introduced to the Eyrie as well, with Lysa Arryn breastfeeding an 8-year-old and accusing Tyrion of breathing. There's also Loras Tyrell's and Renly Baratheon's secret gay love affair, where Loras also influences Renly to try and be king. There's two major plot points in this episode, one being Ned refusing to listen to literally the entire King's Small Council and even the king himself regarding Daenerys being pregnant and posing a threat to Westeros, in which Jorah is out as a confirmed spy. This then leads to Ned quitting as the Hand of the King, the other plot point being the news of Cat capturing Tyrion, reaching King's Landing, pissing off Jaime, and a super bomb sword fight ensues between Jaime and Ned.
This is so much better than I remembered. And then here comes this stupid.
There's also a really emotional and captivating conversation between Cersei and Robert that gives us a glimpse into their past and their really relationship, and shows us a good reason why Cersei dislikes the Starks because of the relationship Robert wanted with Lyanna Stark over her. The writing was phenomenal here, and I loved hearing them speak openly with each other. Also, the journey to the Eyrie is so chaotic, and we get introduced to another absolutely phenomenal character, Bronn. Also, there's a penis. This is absolutely, without a doubt, the best episode of the season thus far. Just so much happens. It's entertaining, it's funny, the writing is insane. The Wolf and the Lion slapped. I don't know if it's at Wedding Party just yet, but it's definitely at the front of Pod's Magic Rod for sure. Has been getting so good, you guys. I cannot. It's very clear this episode that the Stark versus Lannister rivalry is getting very close to reaching its boiling point, if it isn't already there. Stark morale is pretty low because of Jaime's attack on Ned and his men in the previous episode. Even with everything that's happened, Robert still wants and quite frankly needs Ned as his hand. But before anything else happens, Robert goes on a very harmless hunt with his brother, Sir Barristan, and nephew Lancel, and that definitely will not lead to anything super detrimental to the story. Littlefinger continues to get in Ned's ear. It really starts to go awry though when Ned basically tries Tywin Lannister.
Inform Tywin Lannister that he has been summoned to court to answer for the crimes of his bannermen. He will arrive within the fortnight or be branded an enemy of the crown.
The Eyrie and Winterfell scenes are also very noteworthy as well. Theon begins to slowly distance himself from the Starks, and people keep subtly pushing him to do so, whether intentionally or unintentionally. Bran starts getting his three-eyed raven dreams. Oh my god, right, this is a plot in the story too. Bran gets attacked by wildlings too, however Robb comes in and absolutely slays with a little help from Theon. The woman wildling is kept alive and I completely forgot her name, but she's iconic as later on the road. Then at the Eyrie, the first ever trial by combat is commenced by Tyrion, of course, and Bronn eats every single person in the room up with his fighting skills. God love that man. This also leads to Tyrion being free, which is fantastic. But surprisingly, the greatest aspect of this episode is the plethora of Daenerys content we get. She iconically eats a horse heart and is loved by all the Dothraki to Viserys' jealousy and annoyance, but she that horse heart up so hard. I love her. The only thing I can think about with the scene is Trisha Paytas' mukbang where she eats a cake version of the horse heart from this episode. Then to top off this episode is the absolutely diabolical death of Viserys. It still sends shivers down my spine seeing the gold being dumped on him, followed by his screams of agony, and then having it all wrapped up with Daenerys looking deadpanned saying Viserys was not the dragon. It's just all so chilling. If that's not enough for you though, arguably the most groundbreaking revelation throughout the entire show has to be the moment Ned finds out the truth. Joffrey is a bastard to Cersei and Jaime and is not the next in line to become king. This entire scene from Ned putting two and two together after Sansa mentions Joffrey's gold hair to Ned, chillingly naming all these Baratheons with black hairs, and then all leading up to Joffrey and his golden hair. It slaps. It slaps.
Robert Baratheon, black of hair. Joffrey Baratheon, golden head.
It's so incredible to see everything unfold. Season 1 episode 6 was a certified bop and a half. It's going in a wedding party. I'ma just cut to the chase. Ned was the minute he entered King's Landing, and this episode is just the final nail in the coffin. Where to begin with this one? For starters, Tywin Lannister is introduced to us while dissecting a stag, basically showing us how deeply he cares about the legacy and perception of the Lannister house name.
We could establish a dynasty that will last 1,000 years.
I'm touching him with those grubby stag guts hands. Then you get the absolutely iconic pop culture defining conversation between Cersei and Ned that essentially seals Ned's fate and gives us one of the most iconic lines in the entire show.
When you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. There is no middle ground.
Oh my god. Such a good conversation! Robert gets injured by a boar and is basically going to die because of course he is. But he hands over temporary power to Ned until Joffrey comes of age, which in their defense, this probably could have been the best option for everyone since Ned might have been able to slimly counsel Joffrey to some extent, but beyond the point. It's actually revealed right after that Lancel Lannister was drugging the hell out of Robert, which made him drunk as hell, to which Varys cleverly winks, nudge at this fact to Sebastian and Ned.
His Grace did not lack refreshment. I do hope the poor lad does not blame himself. Renly
comes up to Ned with a pretty solid idea to get him the throne because he knows Cersei is not going to let Ned just waddle his way up to the throne and would do anything to get Joffrey to be king. This probably would have been the best option because at least a true Baratheon could have been on the throne, but Ned, sweet Ned, says that Stannis is the true heir and that everyone needs to honor that. Even Littlefinger comes to Ned and kinda maybe insinuates that this isn't a super great idea challenging Joffrey and Cersei's claim to the throne in such a bold manner. Maybe we gotta swear loyalty to Joffrey and Cersei and play nice until something pops up, to which Ned shoots down and even depends on Littlefinger to get the City Watch on his side to overthrow Cersei and Joffrey, despite Littlefinger openly not being on board for this, but he promises Ned that he will get the City Watch on his side anyways. And obviously, we know how all of this turns out for Ned.
I did warn you not to trust me.
Why? There's also stuff happening with Daenerys and the Night's Watch. Daenerys almost gets killed, but Jorah steps in and stops Daenerys from drinking poison. Because of this, Khal Drogo is influenced into potentially getting the Iron Throne for Daenerys and their son. Then in the Night's Watch, Jon and Sam are sworn in and officially considered men of the Watch, but they both get positions as stewards to Jon's annoyance and dismay. But this is actually a potentially great opportunity for Jon to be groomed for command. Overall, this episode was great. It really was. Seeing Ned's complete downfall and having it actually make a lot of sense too was just really awesome to watch unfold. Season 1, episode 7 was really good as well. Honestly, I'm gonna put it ahead of episode 6. We just had a very lengthy roll of pretty amazing episodes just now. Does episode 8 carry on that tradition? No, but it's still a good episode nonetheless. I will say the beginning is so good. The absolute annihilation of all the Stark men, followed by the Septon lady and Syrio Forel helping Sansa and Arya was just a really emotional moment, honestly. Especially with Syrio Forel and Arya. Varys talking to Ned and pretty much being the only person to show some sympathy towards him and basically telling him straight up how badly he f***ed up just made me love Varys even more.
What madness led you to tell the Queen you had learned the truth about Joffrey's birth?
The same thing to Varys. Basically though, Ned is pretty The current state of his imprisonment spreads quickly, especially when Sansa is forced to write a letter to Robb, telling him to bend the knee to Joffrey, which Robb does not appreciate. So instead, he calls the banners and heads to the south with an army and a big fat fuck you to the Lannisters.
His Grace summons me to King's Landing. I'll go to King's Landing. Call the banners.
Oh my god. I actually really love the Robb scenes with him at the base camp with all of his bannermen and Northerners, especially when it comes to his reunion with Catelyn. Truthfully though, the mother and son relationship they have just really cuts deep. It's arguably one of the best written relationships throughout the entire show. I just cannot. Going back to Daenerys and the Dothraki, Drogo gets into a fight with one of the Dothraki because Daenerys chooses to protect all the women in the village they just ransacked, and he ends up getting cut pretty badly, to which one of the women volunteered to assist him, but is accused of being a witch. To be continued. Back at the wall, the Master Commander is attacked by a White Walker, but Jon is able to burn it with fire. Also, Bran and Rickon are the only two Starks left in Winterfell, with Robb leaving to fight the Lannisters, which...
I'll be back soon. Robb will free father, and I'll come back with mother. No, they won't.
Oh, I mean... Did he lie though? The episode ends with essentially a Lannister takeover in King's Landing, with Joffrey on the throne, Tywin replacing Ned as the Hand of the King, and Jaime replacing Sir Barristan as Head of the King's Guard. In a very bad fashion, might I add. Sansa, last but not least, pleased for her father's life. I actually feel really bad for her here. She's essentially all alone up in King's Landing and has to beg for her father's mercy all by herself. It's actually a very daunting thing to put on her shoulders. Overall, this episode was fine. This episode served more as a buffer, I feel, which isn't bad at all. Season 1 episode 8 was fine. The pointing end was fine. It's gonna go in between episode 4 and episode 3. Yeah. Episode 9 was phenomenal. There's really not too much to say, honestly, because everyone and their mother should know what happens at the end and the complete chaos. Even the subplots outside of King's Landing are great. We get introduced to the most dislikable character in the show, Walder Frey. Catelyn has to reason with him in order to let the Northern Army cross to get closer to King's Landing. He ends up letting the army cross, but at a price. Both Robb and Arya have to marry one of the Frey's sons and daughters, which definitely won't bite Robb later in that. The Daenerys Dothraki subplot is actually insane. Drogo is on his deathbed, and if he dies, Daenerys is and has no power at all. So she uses the witch lady to bring him back to life by using blood magic, even when literally every single person there abides against it. Oh my god, oh my god. Oh my god. Why are you doing this? Everyone is telling you to not do this and you're still doing this. I also just have to give Jorah Slayemont a moment in the limelight because he was definitely one of the best parts of the episode. Then back at Tywin Lannister's base camp, Tyrion and his tribesmen are put on the front lines because Tywin hates his own son. One of my favorite parts of this episode is the introduction of Shae, then the really pure trio that's formed between her, Tyrion, and Bronn. Strategist, pop culture icon, and legend Robert Stark utilized a very interesting strategy where a smaller army went to attack Tywin Lannister's base camp to distract from the much bigger army that attacked Jaime's men, to which they wound up winning that battle and capturing Jaime Lannister. Then we have the wall section of this episode, which I actually ended up enjoying quite a bit for some reason. Jon is gifted a Valyrian steel sword by the Lord Commander for saving him last episode. Almost all the Night's Watchmen have a very high and mighty newfound respect for Jon. But Jon is troubled because his family is pretty and he feels a bit helpless not being able to do anything. However, nothing beats what happens to the end.
Joffrey Baratheon is the one true heir to the Iron Throne.
Oh, this is hard to watch.
Lord of the Seven Kingdoms and protector of the realm.
Oh.
What is to be done with this traitor, Your Grace?
My mother wishes me to let Lord Eddard join the Night's Watch, and my Lady Sansa has begged mercy for her father. So long as I am your king, treason shall never go unpunished. Sir Ilyn, bring me his head.
Oh my god. What a moment. What a moment. Oh, who the f? Oh my god. 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 I feel so bad for him. I really do. I'm sorry, Ned. You deserve so much better. You really did. Oh my god. I'm gonna vomit everywhere. Wow. Yeah. Baelor is the best of the season in my opinion. It's going in a wedding party. Oh. Thank you for rubbing salt in the wound, guys. Wrapping up season 1, we have Fire and Blood. Honestly, this episode did a pretty damn good job of concluding all these stories and starting some new ones. I'd say this was a really great episode overall with an absolutely iconic ending. First, we have the aftermath of Ned Stark's beheading at the hands of Joffrey. Joffrey terrorizes everyone, specifically Sansa, and this is really where her hellish journey at King's Landing really begins. Then Arya has to flee King's Landing and becomes a boy and makes her way to the Wall. Basically, Arya's and Sansa's lives are about to suck royally. Back at Robb's base camp, him and Catelyn mourn the death of Ned's life and promises to kill all Lannisters, but because of Ned's death, a bunch of the Stark bannermen rally together and declare Robb as the King of the North! 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 Jon tries to escape the Wall in order to help his brother Robb at war, but is stopped by Sam, Pip, and the other guy whose name I cannot remember, and I apologize greatly. I actually really love the friendship between the four of them, like seriously. Them being the essential reason Jon doesn't leave is actually really heartwarming. The Lord Commander wants him to explore the other side of the Wall with him, which is super slay. At Tywin's base camp, we get more dialogue between Tywin and Tyrion. Tywin appoints Tyrion as the Hand of the King. Deep down, Tywin knows Tyrion is the most logical Lannister he's got, but obviously he won't admit to that. However, Tywin forbids Shae to come with him, but he brings her anyways because Tywin Lannister. The biggest plot point this entire episode happens with Daenerys. Her son is dead because the witch used him as the sacrifice to keep Drogo alive, which does nothing anyways because she only puts him in a coma and essentially horribly over Daenerys at every single angle. Because of this, all the Dothraki under Drogo's leadership all left except the slaves and the servants. So they're all pretty at this point. Daenerys then decides to suffocate Drogo out of love and burns his body along with the witch and the dragon eggs. Daenerys also walks into the fire, very girl boss like, and what happens, you may ask? What a way to end a damn season. God, that entire ending scene with Daenerys on its own is just chef's kiss. Truly. Episode 10 was a really strong conclusion to a really great season. I'm gonna put it in a wedding party at the phrase, but at the end. That's how you end a damn season. Overall, season 1 was an incredibly strong season to start off on. I think it really began to pick up speed from like episode 4 and onwards, in which it just became some of the most high quality television I've had the privilege of witnessing. We really got a glimpse into the absolute monstrosity this show is about to become, but in the best way possible. And now we enter season 2. How will it hold up to its predecessor, you ask? Well, let's find out.
Intermission. End of intermission.
Season 2! Season 2 kicks off with a pretty decent start. This first episode mainly served as a reintroduction to storylines and characters from Season 1, along with an introduction to some new storylines and competitors for the Iron Throne. While nothing really super interesting or memorable happens, I do think this episode managed to take the cards it was dealt being the first of the season and was able to be entertaining and engaging to watch. We are basically thrown into a war-ridden world in a post-Ned season right off the bat with icon legend newest Hand of the King, Tyrion Lannister, arriving back at King's Landing.
Yes! Oh my god.
You know what? I don't even have a photo of him. 1 second. Essentially, he's there to fix the mess that Joffrey and Cersei, to an extent as well, have left in King's Landing. Tyrion scolds Cersei for not having control over Joffrey, or over anything for that matter, because she also lost Arya Stark, who would have been vital in making peace with the Starks. I just have to say though, whenever Cersei and Tyrion have dialogue with each other, it's just so captivating to watch, and Joffrey is a mega prick.
How many bastards does he have running?
Smack that. That's not all in King's Landing though. Cersei forces Littlefinger to find Arya, while Sansa is basically the Lannisters' prisoner at this point. Our 3 northern men are up to some snazzy things too. Jon Snow and the Night's Watch are now north of the Wall and have gone to stay at Craster's Keep. Craster is an incredibly disgusting person because he has multiple wives, some being his own daughters. So yeah, not a phenomenal guy. But oh wait, where are the boys? Robb Stark is on an absolute roll, winning 3 battles. He has strong allies. He's hot as and he has Jaime Lannister as a captive. Robb comes up with a treaty of some sort that does obviously heavily benefit the Starks much more than their counterparts. The Lannisters must deliver both Arya and Sansa back to Robb and Catelyn, along with the bones of Ned, so he can be buried with his family. And honestly, such a cool moment, but he also demands that the Lannisters never interfere in the North, which essentially will make Winterfell and the entirety of the North its own individual nation.
Your Grace, these are my terms.
Ooh.
If the Queen Regent and her son
Get
meet them,
there.
I'll give them peace.
Robb.
Theon encourages Robb to let him go see his father, Balon Greyjoy, in order to get Robb's army more ships. Theon is such a good guy. There's no way he'd fuck this all up. Catelyn is not entirely pleased with Robb trying to ally with the Greyjoys, however, because they are known to be rather untrustworthy. However, this is quickly blown over because Robb sends Catelyn to ally with Renly Baratheon, who has over 100,000 men, which is insane. And then there's another super sweet mother and son interaction.
You've done so well. Your father would be proud.
Oh my god. This hurts.
Then wrapping up the Northernmen section of this episode, we have Bran back at Winterfell, basically leading the entire state at just 10 years old. And you can tell it's taking a bit of a toll on him, which is obviously understandable. He starts having jacked up dreams, taking the form of his direwolf, and seeing a rather peculiar comet flying overhead. The comet signifies dragons. Yeah, that's right. Dragons. Daenerys is still alive, and so are all these former servants, slaves, and scouts. They're stranded in the desert trying to find any signs of civilization, but failing miserably. They're all pretty much on their deathbeds, and it's actually a very depressing moment, especially when Daenerys shows genuine care for the people following her, sending her scouts all around to find anything, literally anything. Oh, what's that? Is that?
They'll bend the knee or I'll destroy them.
Stannis Baratheon finally is introduced. Currently, he resides on a little island named Dragonstone, plotting and scheming his way to the Iron Throne that, to be honest, legitimately is rightfully his. He writes a letter calling out Cersei and Jaime for incest and demeans Joffrey's claim to the throne and sends it all over Westeros. 2 pretty significant characters that are also introduced are Melisandre, a sorceress of some kind who is very heavily influencing Stannis in his battle to the throne, and of course, Sir Davos. I absolutely adore this man. Then this whole episode ends with a pretty disturbing scene. Joffrey has sent all his guards to kill every Baratheon bastard who could potentially pose a threat to Joffrey's claim, but they didn't get Gendry. So I wrote a lot. I feel like episode 1 did such a good job of setting everyone up for the storylines we'll be getting this season, which is why this is so long. I'd say it's around the middle. Kicking off season 2, the North remembers. It was a good start. It goes ahead, everything in Ned's honor except episode 4. Nothing really happens. This might be the quote-unquote worst episode of the bunch so far, but really I was left kind of underwhelmed overall. We've got the Arya plotline as she slowly makes her way to the wall, with the Kingsguard on their tail, coming for Gendry, who could be a potential competitor to Joffrey's claim to the throne. Gendry and Arya bond over being wanted by the royal family. Once Gendry reveals he knows Arya is a girl, and Arya reveals herself as a Stark, and it was a really cute moment, I will say. For all those Sam and Gilly lovers, Gilly is indeed introduced this episode, and she is pregnant. She is rather frightened of this though, and asks Jon and Sam to take her with them, which makes the both of them grow rather weary of what in the heck happens to the baby boys. Daenerys is still struggling hardcore, and to make matters worse, one of her scouts come back with their body parts dismembered, which only makes the morale even worse than before. In the Stannis side of things, we learned that Davos can't read and was arrested as a straggler, ironically by the hands of Stannis, who spared him but still cut off some of his fingers. He also distressed Melisandre and the Lord of Light, which comes into play pretty drastically as Stannis and Melisandre in order to increase Stannis' chances of a clear path to victory and to satisfy the Lord of Light. I will say quite a bit does happen in King's Landing if you do enjoy heavy dialogue scenes. Ross is still traumatized by the events of last episode, and rather than console her, Littlefinger basically threatens her life if she doesn't get it together, which really gives us a good look into Littlefinger's sinister side, which he usually hides fairly well.
I hate bad investments.
Lincoln, you'll miss it, but Podrick is subtly introduced as a mere squire to Tyrion as he condemns the commander of the City Watch, replacing him with Bronn, to Cersei's dismay, which leads to a pretty cool political conversation between her and Tyrion. Arguably, my favorite part of this episode was the conversation between Tyrion and Varys.
Threaten me again, and I'll have you thrown into the sea.
You might be disappointed in the results. The big fish eat the little fish, and I keep on paddling.
Love this man. This entire scene was just too good. Most of the attention this episode lands on Theon and his family reunion. He returns to the Iron Islands for the first time in almost a decade, and it's really nothing special. Nobody really cared much for his arrival or knew it was him. When he gets to the castle, his dad basically berates him and questions his loyalty to the Greyjoys over the Starks. And if that isn't enough, all of what could have been Theon's responsibilities have gone to his sister, Yara. In short, Papa Greyjoy rejects the Starks. The episode wraps up with Jon Snow trying to see what they do to the baby boys, but promptly getting caught. Well, that was kind of underwhelming. This episode was just seriously lacking compared to all the other 11 ones we've just watched. Season 2, episode 2, I hate to say it, of all the episodes we've watched so far, it was the most underwhelming one. It wasn't bad by any means. It's gonna go in Ned's honor. It's at the end. I don't know if it's because of the introduction to Marjorie and Brienne of Tarth, or Tyrion just continuously eating up anyone that attempts to try him as the Hand of the King, but I actually really enjoyed this episode a lot. Things start off pretty much at a 10, with Craster kicking out the Night's Watch when Jon Snow, oh my god, my neck. When Jon Snow gets a little too curious and finds out the truth behind where the baby boys end up going, Catelyn arrives at Renly's camp, and I personally love it much more than I remember. So many fantastic characters are introduced, primarily Brienne of motherfucking Tarth and Marjorie motherfucking Tyrell.
May I present my wife?
Yes, you may, Renly.
Marjorie of House Tyrell.
Thank you. Also, Renly gave Brienne a spot on the King's Guard per her request. The important part is that Catelyn is at Renly's camp in an attempt to garner more support for Rob's cause, which Renly is actually very receptive towards. Strategy talk is put on hold though, because Renly has to pray. But Loras is not feeling in a praying kind of mood, and instead strongly urges Renly to pray with his sister Marjorie instead. Obviously, he isn't very receptive about it until...
I'm sorry.
Do you want my brother to come in and help?
Oh. What? No wonder why people love her so much. She's an ally, you guys. All ally jokes aside, this really is a great scene to show Marjorie's strategy for gaining power and why she's so likable. Back at the Iron Islands, Theon cannot get a break from his family because now they want to overthrow the Starks at Winterfell, since Robb is occupied with the war. I will give Theon one thing. He genuinely does try to steer his family away from causing a rivalry with the Starks, but it's fruitless. Yara and Balon give Theon an ultimatum that he's either with them or with the Starks. And what does Theon choose? Oh, Theon. Young Theon. I've just gotta say, season 2 above all else has been conducting all the King's Landing subplots flawlessly. For starters, Shae is getting tired of being locked up, and Cersei is being as ruthless to Sansa as ever. Varys and Tyrion decide to hook them up, and Shae becomes Sansa's handmaiden. Props to the writers for this one because they just mesh so well with each other. The biggest slay of the episode award, without a doubt, goes to Tyrion. This entire sequence of Tyrion playing everyone is just Tyrion has the goal to get Myrcella, Cersei's only daughter, to marry someone from a major house and solidify an alliance with them while also protecting her from the inevitable war that's going to come to King's Landing. Whichever scenario Cersei confronts him with is going to expose who is a spy for Cersei, which ends up being Pycelle, which also means Myrcella is going to Dorne and Pycelle is an untrustworthy snake working for Cersei. Obviously, Cersei is pissed at Tyrion trying to send her daughter away. Pycelle gets his beard chopped off and Littlefinger is pissed for being played. The only person not pissed at Tyrion and is actually rather impressed by him is Varys.
Well played, my Lord Hand.
The only one who didn't get upset. When these two men come together and talk, it really just does something to me. I love Varys and I didn't film it, but he says a really famous quote from the series and it's one of my personal favorites. Power resides where men believe it resides, alluding to the fact that Tyrion is more powerful than he seems. The ending takes a complete 180. We go back to the Night's Watch recruits with Arya, who we learn has trauma from Ned's death. They all end up getting attacked by the King's Guard, who are still on a hunt for Gendry. Arya saves the caged up no-name guy who will be pretty damn important later down the road. To wrap up everything, Arya pretends that a dead blonde boy is Gendry and they all get sent to Harrenhal, which is Lannister territory. So honestly, this episode was a pretty good one. I really loved What Is Dead May Never Die. I'm gonna put it in between episode 2 and episode 5. I wrote so much for season 2, what the hell. Episode 4 was alright. It was just kind of dark. This season is already much more cynical, dark, and brooding over its predecessor. For starters, you have all the Harrenhal torture scenes with Arya, which are just brutal. Even when you don't see what's happening, just the wailing and screaming that occurs, it's just brutal. Ironically, the most villainous man in Westeros, Tywin Lannister, comes in and brings a bit of light as he puts all the captors to work and outs Arya as a girl, but really thinks nothing of it.
This one's a girl, you idiot.
I should mention that the Brotherhood is brought up multiple times during the torture scenes. Wonder what that is. Then the brutal and dark nature of season 2 continues as Joffrey is shown at his absolute worst. He torments Sansa in front of spectators at the throne room for her brother's actions as he defeats the Lannisters at another battle. However, this is abruptly stopped by Tyrion, who is just so incredible to Sansa and has shown to be the only Lannister in King's Landing to actually show any empathy towards her. Joffrey's brutality doesn't stop there, however, as Tyrion attempts to find a way to calm Joffrey down and gives him 2 sex workers. I distinctly remember the first time watching this scene and it just made me so uncomfortable. This really just shows how little control Joffrey's advisors, even Tyrion, have over him. He's actually really getting the hang of the political game in King's Landing. He basically gets Lancel to admit to sleeping with Cersei, which he uses as blackmail against him in order to get him to spy on Cersei. This entire scene was just gold. Melisandre gives birth to a full-fledged demon baby. Renly's camp takes center stage here as Littlefinger arrives and is up to no good. He attempts to persuade Cat into giving the Lannisters Jaime back in order to get back Sansa and Arya. However, we, the audience, know this isn't possible because Arya is gone and Littlefinger is lying. But Catelyn does seem to be heavily debating this option once Littlefinger brings her Ned's bones. Daenerys, Jorah, and what's left of her Dothraki tribe make their way to the wealthy city of Koth. They are greeted by the 13 who rule Koth and have taken an interest in her dragons. But because of her hesitation to show them, Daenerys is pushed away until one man, Xaro, vouches for them and lets them in. Also, a super non-important character who definitely will not have an impact in future seasons is introduced.
But you'll have a hard time matching your army.
This episode was pretty dark. It was pretty alright. Episode 4 is alright. It's gonna go in between episode 1 of season 2 and season 1, episode 8 in Ned's honor. Episode 5 was also a pretty good and dandy episode. I will say it seems that season 2 is struggling to match up to the excellence of season 1. As I said though, episode 5 was just fine. The episode starts off very strong as we have the shocking death of Renly Baratheon that opens up the story. Why did they kill off Renly? I remember watching this for the first time and was actually pretty devastated. But yes, Renly dies by the hand of a demon baby and chaos ensues at Renly's camp as Stannis makes his way to claim all of Renly's men and the Tyrells are forced to flee with Littlefinger, even gaining a rather unlikely but all the more significant alliance between them. Once Stannis arrives at the camp, strategy talk begins as the probability of Stannis being able to actually win a battle for the throne increases tenfold. Stannis and Davos debrief about current war plans, one of which includes Melisandre, which Stannis urges reasoning to bring her while Davos abides against it, which influences Stannis' decision to not take her and instead have Davos be in charge of the waterfront, which is slay. Brienne and Catelyn have fled back to Rob's camp, two strong, loyal, and honest women coming together to form the ultimate girl boss slay as Brienne offers Catelyn her service, to which Catelyn accepts. Brienne also begins her revenge tour against Stannis, which is pretty vital in learning about her motives later on. Back at Harrenhal, the greatest duo of all time, Tywin and Arya, is formed. I swear, every time these two have dialogue with each other, it's as if all the world's problems have been resolved and we can all live in peace and prosperity. Arya and Jaqen Hagar become besties because Arya saved him 2 episodes ago, to which Jaqen owes her 3 depths. She gets to choose 3 people he can kill. The Night's Watchmen meet up with Half Hand, who's attempting to murder Mance Radar, the king of the wildlings, if you will. He brings together a small party to secretly kill him, which of course involves Jon Snow. On the opposite side of the wall at Winterfell, a small town not too far off is attacked and Sir Roderick takes a small army of 200 to put an end to it, thinking it's just some Lannisters taking over. But little do they know, it's actually the Greyjoys. Theon, earlier in the episode, fearing that his peers still do not respect him, decides to take on Winterfell and finally garner some sort of respect from his family. To confirm this, Brandon's dream is about the ocean engulfing Winterfell, the ocean being the Greyjoys, and we finally learn Osha's name in this scene.
Otherwise they'll put me in chains again.
Osha.
Osha is her name. Daenerys and the Dothraki attempt to settle in Koth, really to no avail as Dothraki and Koth culture do not mix very well. Servant Lady is starting to get sussy and a little too obsessed with Daenerys' dragons. Zaro, the guy who let them in the last episode, acts hella sus and asks for Daenerys' hand in marriage. Jorah, the only person with any sense at the moment, heavily disapproves of Daenerys marrying someone from Koth. The King's Landing subplots have stolen the show yet again. Season 2 has not been missing with the King's Landing subplots, not one bit. The news of Renly's death reaches Cersei and Tyrion. Stannis' army has increased tenfold, and because of this, they gotta start planning for war. However, Joffrey has already been doing this in secret over Tyrion's head, and Cersei, still upset with Tyrion over Myrcella, refuses to say to him. But Lancel doesn't. The plan is to use wildfire cans and to toss them at the Baratheon army. Bronn, of all people, comes in with several worries about tossing wildfire with zero control, especially in a battle where chaos will definitely ensue.
Which means pots falling, which means fire inside the walls, which means the poor trying to defend the city end up burning it down.
Okay, Bronn, coming through with the strategy. Quite simply, this is why Bronn needs to sit at the Iron Throne. So Tyrion begins to make edits and changes to the wildfire plans. I should also quickly mention that at this point, because of Joffrey's recent cruelties, the King's Landing citizens despise the royal family. Keep that in mind for next episode. But yes, that was episode 5. So I will give season 2 one thing. There is a lot of world and character building that is being done with 10 times the cast size compared to season 1. Episode 5 did have a very strong start, but because of that strong start, things did kind of fall off near the end, but this episode was still strong nonetheless. Season 2 episode 5, The Ghost of Harrenhal, was pretty good. I'm gonna put it behind episode 4.
This episode was so good. A lot of goes down as a majority of the story building this season really starts paying off here. Things kick off with a bang as the ocean does indeed hit Winterfell. Theon has taken over and betrayed the Starks, much to everyone's dismay and disgust. Theon forces Bran to yield Winterfell to him, which does result in a pretty tragic yet kind of adorable conversation, as if it's two brothers getting into an argument with each other. Bran does yield reluctantly, but the Northerners are obviously not on board and have very little to no respect for Theon.
Do you take me for a fool?
Yeah.
Gets far worse once Sir Roderick is captured and brought to Theon, who then scolds and disrespects Theon in front of everyone, which then is influenced to send a message and behead Roderick in a rather hasty move that really only upsets people more.
Oh my god, this entire scene.
There's more really fun and cute Tywin and Arya moments at Harrenhal. That plus Tywin's intense strategy meetings are just so interesting to watch.
My cupbearer can read better than you.
But once again, slightly hits the fan as Littlefinger meets up with Tywin to discuss more strategy, one of which includes allying with the Tyrells, but of course Arya is in pretty deep now, especially if she gets caught. Thankfully she doesn't, but she does almost get in trouble again as she steals a note regarding her older brother and gets caught by a soldier who almost exposes Arya right at Tywin's door if it weren't for Jaqen H'ghar. Arya, quick on her toes, uses her second depth to basically cover her before things escalate. Back at the little half-hand and Jon Snow crew, they end up running into a small trio of wildlings and take them down so they can't alert a close-by free folk village of the incoming crows. However, one of the wildlings in particular catches Jon Snow's eye. I love Ygritte. Her dynamic and connection with Jon Snow is so good. But yeah, this intro to Ygritte was great. Jon is given the responsibility of killing her after a bit of questioning, but obviously doesn't go through with it. Ygritte runs away and Jon has to catch her, which separates him from the others. Fuck. I will say this does create some pretty funny moments between Ygritte and Jon Snow cuddling each other afterwards. Daenerys is struggling to garner support and respect in Koth as she attempts to get some ships to sail back to Westeros, but to no avail. Robb Stark is back and continues to flirt with the nurse Talisa, but Catelyn returns with Brienne and she reminds him of the deal they made with Walder Frey. However, the reunion is cut short as the news of Theon taking over Winterfell and Sir Roderick's death make it back to the camp. Cat and Robb are obviously pissed, but Lord Bolton, one of Robb's bannermen, insists that his bastard son helps them capture Theon and take Winterfell back. But yet again, King's Landing obviously shines through. Remember our last episode when I mentioned the people of King's Landing aren't the biggest fans of the royal family? That comes back to haunt them. After the depressing ceremony where Marcella is sent off to Dorne and Cersei threatens Tyrion yet again, the family makes their way back to the castle, but as they do so, they are heckled by the townspeople until one of them throws cow at Joffrey, and everything just goes absolutely bonkers. Joffrey chaotically demands his guards to kill them all, which results in absolute chaos. Everyone is attacking everyone. The royal family is put in immense danger. Someone's leg gets torn off. It's all just bananas. Sansa is separated from the group, however. Joffrey selfishly doesn't care what happens to her, to Tyrion's dismay, and orders him to order the guards to find Sansa and return her safely. Tyrion's patience is waning thin, and so is mine.
You're talking to a king!
Oh, get his ass.
Sansa is found by the Hound, however, and is brought safely back to Tyrion. Even the ending is great as Osha tricks Theon and helps Bran and Rickon escape Winterfell temporarily. And then there's Daenerys' men and Handmaiden being ambushed behind her back, along with her dragons being stolen, which leads to the greatest quote of the entire series, in my opinion.
Where are my dragons?
This was a great episode. It really was. Is it top tier worthy? I'm gonna let future me decide that.
Episode 6 was pretty good. I think the best of season 2 so far. In between episode 5 and episode 3, it goes. Look at how gorgeous that is. Another pretty good episode, actually. However, I think where episode 7 really thrived was within its dialogue. Let's change things up a bit and start off with Daenerys and Koth. The hunt for her dragons begins with Zora supposedly on her side, trying to assist her. They then confront the 13, to which the sorcerer magician guy admits to taking the dragons to the House of the Undying. Turns out Zora was working alongside him as well and was also in on the ambush and the stolen dragons. They both begin luring her into the House of the Undying in order to keep her trapped with her dragons, but the subplot ends swiftly there. The Theon and Stark subplot was pretty strong this episode, especially with the side interactions Theon would have with the Maester. Even with the betrayal, it seems as though Maester Luwin still has faith in Theon, that he has some loyalties to the Starks and is still a good guy, just a bit lost. Which only makes things more tragic when he shows two burnt boys who are supposedly Bran and Rickon. But is it truly them? At King's Landing, we actually get a lot of Sansa time, which was appreciated. Sansa gets her first period. Shay helps her try and hide it, which is a great interaction between the two. Unfortunately, this is all in vain as the Hound catches Sansa. There's also a very great conversation between Cersei and Sansa that ensues afterwards, where Cersei surprisingly gives Sansa some pretty valuable advice with her future and family life. Another great Cersei convo scene happens between her and Tyrion. This actually leads to a very interesting interaction between Cersei and Tyrion, as Tyrion does awkwardly try to comfort Cersei, but because of their incredibly rocky relationship, all he can really do is just awkwardly stand near her. Very tragic yet endearing moment. Tywin genuinely begins to treat Arya like his own daughter, feeding her, showing her kindness, talking about history, and just really lovely father and daughter things to an extent. But it's funny because he still doesn't catch on to the fact that Arya is the Arya Stark. Even the most intelligent man in Westeros can't clock Arya completely. The best character interaction this episode by far goes to Ygritte and Jon Snow by a long shot. Ygritte torments Jon constantly and it's just hilarious. It's like a toddler egging on a parent. There's also one pretty intense fight they have near the beginning that actually gives us a partial glimpse into the Crow versus Wildling rivalry.
You know nothing, Jon Snow.
Oh. Ygritte keeps egging on Jon about his vows and such, which leaves him slightly distracted and she makes a run for it. However, Jon doesn't know this was a trap and is led right into a group of wildlings by Ygritte and is then promptly captured. The events that unfold at Robb's camp are really what takes the cake with this episode. A lot goes on in a pretty speedy amount of time. The messenger Lannister guy from the first few episodes arrives back at camp and delivers the news that Cersei bonked the Northerners on the head. They just temporarily put the messenger with his cousin Jaime Lannister. Not good, people. Not good. Jaime decides to crush his cousin's hopes and dreams and kills him. After he literally poured his heart and soul out to you. God damn. The Karstark's son, who is watching over the prisoner, rushes in and is also killed by Jaime, which really only makes 10 trillion times worse. He does escape temporarily though, but is brought back and the Karstarks are furious and want him dead. Basically, for the first time this season, we see some very visible cracks within the Northern Army. Catelyn wants Jaime alive, but Lord Karstark wants him dead as vengeance. The Karstarks are growing restless as the night nears, to the point where they're most likely going to murder Jaime by force. So Catelyn and Brienne visit Jaime in the night, and holy hell, does Jaime completely rip into Catelyn. He is trying tooth and nail to just crack her.
I've never been with any woman but Cersei, so in my own way, I have more honor than poor old dead Ned.
What is Jaime's fate, you ask? Well, we don't know because the episode ends on several cliffhangers. Overall, episode 7 was another very solid, pretty damn good episode. The dialogue and the writing was just golden this episode. Episode 7 was also very solid. It's gonna go in Pod's Magic Rod. This episode was pretty alright. I think it doesn't really match up to its two predecessors, but it's definitely somewhere in the middle at least. You can tell the season is slowly coming to a close as more stories progressively begin to wrap up. The Harrenhal subplot has basically come to a close for now, as Tywin leaves with some men for King's Landing and Arya also escapes with Gendry and Hot Pie. But to do this, she incites the help of Jaqen H'ghar, who still owes her one more debt. In the north, Yara arrives at Winterfell to take Theon back to the Iron Islands because he's being a dumb and he's in immense danger. This is actually a rather interesting moment between them because while Yara doesn't fully admit to it, it's very clear she does care deeply about her brother. However, Theon chooses not to go back and to stay in Winterfell. We'll see how that goes. Jon Snow is up over the wall as we come to find out not only did the wildlings capture him, but they also captured Half Hand and killed the others. However, Half Hand creates a ploy to get the wildlings to trust Jon Snow so he can gain some information from their plans to breach the wall. King's Landing has a few pretty interesting moments as war against Stannis threateningly lingers amongst them all. Tyrion continues to plan for battle and pushes for Joffrey to be on the battlefield to give the soldiers more reason and inspiration to fight. Cersei completely hates this and still hates her brother, so she supposedly captures Shae and basically says whatever happens to Joffrey happens to his prostitute girlfriend. It isn't Shae though, it's actually Roz, so Tyrion plays along, but then a very sweet moment between him and the actual Shae ensues afterwards, in which the "I am yours and you are mine" quote is born. Some more fantastic Tyrion and Varys scenes come up as they speak with Joffrey about war tactics.
They say Stannis never smiles. I'll give him a red smile. From ear to ear.
Imagine Stannis' terror.
I am trying.
Love them. Overall, you know the deal. Varys and Tyrion talking on screen together is always for the boys with the boom system top town AC with the cooling system. Sam and the other Night's Watchmen find Dragonglass too, which is an interesting moment. Daenerys and Jorah share a moment. Stannis makes Davos the hand of the king and share a moment, but the real action actually takes place at Robb's camp again. Catelyn released Jaime overnight with Brienne to return him to King's Landing in order to get back her daughters. Cat did kind of f**k up. And now Robb and Karstark are pissed. Robb then basically imprisons his own mother. All these issues keep building up and falling into Robb's hands, and he's definitely not in the same perfect power position he was in at the beginning of the season. The biggest relationship building of this episode, however, goes to Robb and Talisa. It's as clear as day. They really are growing fond of each other, and they keep bonding and just connecting on a very personal level, which it would be great to see the King of the North fall in love if he wasn't already promised to someone else. Talisa tells us a very personal inside story of why she gave up her life as a highborn and became a healer.
I decided two things that day. I would not waste my years planning dances and masquerades with the other noble ladies. I would never live in a slave city again.
God, I really don't. This right here pretty much does it for Robb, and he basically says straight up he does not want to marry the Frey girl, and Talisa agrees, and they
It's a very beautiful bridge.
Oh.
Honey, you've got a big storm coming.
This episode does end on a pretty big reveal that Bran and Rickon are still alive. Overall, pretty decent episode. The Prince of Winterfell was fine and dandy. It's gonna go right in the middle of Ned's honor. What a world, for real. Blackwater is the best episode by far. We just went from consistently good episodes to a whole biblical verse. Ever since the end of season 1, this impending battle between Stannis and the Lannisters has been getting constantly built up until this very moment. Stannis is at the Lannisters' doorstep, and the tone of this episode is already far different from anything we've witnessed thus far. The lighting is slightly darker, and the mood is obviously more grim. It's almost as if you're pretty much experiencing the dread that all of these people are feeling. Before the battle begins, there's a few combos that occur that were all pretty integral in relationship and character building, but also showing just how high the stakes of this battle have become. Davos and his son share a moment that becomes rather tragic later on when he realizes it's their last. Spoiler alert. Shae and Tyrion have a sweet moment. Pycelle gives Cersei essence of nightshade per her request. A very intense moment between Sandor Clegane and Bronn pops up right after a phenomenal rendition of a certain song that represents a certain house. All that quickly comes to an end once those damn bells start ringing and those drums start singing.
Drums!
Ooh, this is too good. That could have been the entire episode, and this would still get top 5 at most. I do not look phenomenal right now. There's a few more interactions before the violence begins. Varys and Tyrion once again prove they're the two best characters within the first few seasons. We get slight insight into Varys' disdain for magic as he heavily relies on Tyrion to prevent Stannis and especially Melisandre from getting anywhere near the throne. Tyrion has such a great quick moment with Bronn. Shae, Sansa, Tyrion, and Joffrey all have final moments with each other. There's actually some slight manipulation on Sansa's behalf towards Joffrey as she attempts to get him to fight where the war would be bloodiest. This is definitely a hint at the fact that Sansa is indeed learning to play the game. So the men go off into the field, the women are hiding in a room together with a drunken Cersei and optimistic Sansa, and the battle begins. I've decided to make it darker because I feel like this episode calls for it. Stannis' army is quickly approaching as the Lannisters hold fast and prepare to defend the hell out of King's Landing, but things seem rather slow at the moment. The Lannisters have no fleet apart from one single ship, but that's all that is needed.
Mother! Get down!
Oh, goodness me. The visuals of the wildfire explosion is just incredible. The power and sheer force of the explosion is felt everywhere, and the brutality that ensues afterwards is just, well, it's brutal. The death of Davos' son, the men burning alive in the ocean, and this isn't even the climax of the episode. Stannis pushes forward despite half of his army dying by wildfire and begins to storm the walls as the Lannister army continues to desperately defend. The next point that also makes this episode simply iconic is the choreography and cinematography that's done during the battle scenes. It looks like we went back to medieval times to witness an actual battle happening up close. The scenes throughout the episode switch back from the fighting to dialogue between Sansa and Cersei, which does sometimes kill the excitement and intensity, but Cersei drunkenly giving Sansa simultaneously the best and worst life advice is hilarious at times.
They are your guests under your protection. You asked them here.
It was expected of me.
Cersei. Back in the field, things are not looking great for the Lannister side of things, as Stannis has started gaining the upper hand and is quite literally breaking down the castle walls, if not already on top of the wall, clawing his way inwards. This actually results in the Hound iconically retreating and quitting as Joffrey's guard in the best way possible.
Fuck the King's guard. Fuck the city.
Fuck
the King.
You can't deny he ate that the hell up. This is quite literally the Hound's best character / debut moment, and he literally gets better with every season from here on out. The Lannister army morale is pretty much non-existent now that Joffrey has left his army per Cersei's requests. However, as one king falls, another one rises, and his name is Tyrion Lannister. Tyrion takes charge and is able to gain the respect of the soldiers, even if some were very hesitant at first. The way he spoke was incredibly relatable. Those soldiers don't want to fight for their king. They want to fight for their wives, their kids, their home. Some were even forced to be there. And in his speech, Tyrion acknowledges all those points. Tyrion leads a successful blindside attack from behind using the tunnels that Varys showed him earlier, and there's a slight, ever so slight moment of victory and optimism. Do you hear them? Do you hear them? Until the rest of Stannis' army comes in from the right. Things start looking very bleak again. Cersei acknowledges this and leaves the hiding space with Tommen. Shae sends Sansa to her room for safety since Stannis will most likely not harm her if he finds her there safe and sound. So basically, some more great Shae and Sansa interactions. Sansa goes to her room and finds the Hound there. The Hound offers to take Sansa to Winterfell, and while their interactions have always been tense, with this one beginning as such, it does end with Sansa finally trusting and feeling comfortable with Sandor. The fighting is coming to a close. One rather bizarre moment happens in particular, however. Sir Mandon Moore attempts to kill Tyrion, but only manages to badly slice his face before Pod the God swoops in and saves Tyrion. Which brings us to the conclusion, which is magnificent. Cersei is on the Iron Throne with Tommen, telling him a story as she prepares to give him the essence of Nightshade. But as she recites the story in the most phenomenal, iconic way possible, another army charges in. Who could possibly be this knight in shining armor to save the day? Oh, what a moment.
We have won.
I don't think I need to explain myself in saying that this episode is number 1. Thank you and good night. Blackwater was simply the best of the best. It's going first. It's currently the reigning champion. I just really like this episode. I love this episode a lot. The finale was really good. In King's Landing, the rise of Tywin Lannister and the Tyrells, which is juxtaposed with the silent fall of Tyrion Lannister, is so much more heartbreaking than I remembered. As much as I love Marjorie's Queen of the Seven Kingdoms Slayage debut and Tywin's Hand of the King Slayage debut, seeing all the work and all the good that Tyrion did for King's Landing and even for his family, just to be immediately tossed to the side is legitimately heartbreaking. He's been demoted from the King's Hand now that Tywin is back. All these men he once had by his side have left. Bronn's been demoted. According to Varys, his sister was the one behind the attempted murder. It's all just... damn. I will say the silver lining with all of this is the support from Podrick, Varys, and Shae especially. Their support may be the most silent, but their acknowledgement and praise towards Tyrion was so touching.
There are many who know that without you, this city faced certain defeat. The king won't give you any honors. The histories won't mention you. But we will not forget.
God, why is this so depressing? In other subplots, Littlefinger offers quote-unquote assistance to Sansa. Lord Varys gets Ross to become a spy for him regarding Lord Baelish. And then a very interesting scene between Brienne, Jaime, and 3 Starkmen occurs, which basically shows us that both sides have their fair share of good and bad, Stark or Lannister. It also gives us a glimpse into Brienne's code of honor. She doesn't serve houses, but rather individual people. Winterfell also meets a pretty grim downfall, much like Tyrion's. We'll start off with Theon reaping the consequences of not leaving Winterfell with Yara in episode 8, because now some Stark bannermen are right outside ready to take back Winterfell. This actually shows some really bittersweet moments between Maester Luwin and Theon as he tries helping Theon safely escape Winterfell and suggests he run to the wall, but Theon rejects this and stays in Winterfell, gathering his men for the fight of their lives.
What is dead may never die!
Well, at least they let him finish his speech. Yeah, Theon's men are not willing to put their lives on the line for Winterfell. So they stab Maester Luwin, yield to the bannermen, and supposedly burn down Winterfell. There isn't a fully straight answer as who did it, but point is, Depression Express is writing strong as we get a very emotional and sweet moment with Maester Luwin, Bran, and Rickon. And then Osha as well, who has become a bit of a parental figure for Bran and Rickon. Maester Luwin tells them all to ride north to meet up with Jon Snow, who would protect them. So after Osha ends Maester Luwin's suffering, Osha, Bran, Rickon, Summer, Shaggy Wolf, and Hodor depressingly walk past a burning Winterfell and make their way north. Robb and Talisa's wedding happens, which we all know this is not going to end well. Catelyn actually strongly encouraged Robb not to go through with this in fear of upsetting Walder Frey, but because of Catelyn and Robb's recent quarrel over Jaime Lannister, Robb obviously does not want to listen to his mother. Arya and Jaqen meet one last time before Jaqen departs for Braavos. He gives Arya a coin from Braavos in case she ever wants to become a faceless person. Funny enough, the final scenes of Daenerys and Koth are actually the best ones of that subplot, which is ironic. I do really love the journey through the House of the Undying, seeing the Iron Throne in what's presumably snow or ashes. It leaves a lot up to interpretation. Another really f***ing emotional moment happens though when Daenerys is greeted by Drogo and their unborn son in a tent, and it really is so heartbreaking seeing what could have been. But despite these temptations, Daenerys pushes through and finds her dragons, who then iconically kill the sorcerer with fire. Xaro and the traitor servant girl get locked up in a vault that was supposed to have gold and treasures but ended up having nothing. Then Daenerys, Jorah, and the Dothraki ransack the castle in order to buy a ship. That's right, people. Finally, Daenerys is going places. And then the ending. Ooh, the ending. Bro, oh my god. Oh, bitch. Oh, Lord. Oh my god. Like, holy the producers making sure our asses have not forgotten about the real threat of the show. But like, honestly, this was a incredible conclusion to an overall solid season. Episode 10, the finale. It was really great. I think I liked it more than the season 1 finale, honestly. I'm gonna put it in between episode 6 of season 1 and episode 10 of season 1. Well, there you have it. Here is the overall tier list. I'd say pretty solid overall. So regarding season 2, while I do think season 1 just had slightly more going for it than season 2, that does not take away from the fact that season 2 was pretty great. The world of Game of Thrones is expanding. More worlds, more characters. A lot has been introduced and built on with season 2, and it's really exciting watching this all over again. That is one of the things season 2 did very well, setting the groundwork for future seasons. But that being said, by far, the King's Landing subplots are what made season 2. Not a single dull moment in King's Landing. The Koth subplot wasn't as bland as people make it out to be. Arya's subplot at Harrenhal was very entertaining. Rob's and Catelyn's subplots were great. The Winterfell and Theon subplots were great. Season 2 was honestly pretty good. Well, there you have it. The first 2 seasons of Game of Thrones. The beginning, if you will. I need to sit up. I look like I have no neck. Ugh. I actually really enjoyed rewatching these 2 seasons and just being reminded at how brilliant the writing and the storytelling was during Game of Thrones' early stages. I think we as a society need to reiterate just how incredible season 1 was. There was one point where literally every single episode would be better than the last, building up to such a stunning finale and basically laying the groundwork for what future seasons would build off of. And season 2, while it didn't entirely beat out its predecessor, it still managed to give us the same insanely amazing, consistent quality that season 1 had. We get introduced to some more iconic characters, and I mean, this season is home to Blackwater, need I say more? Overall, these seasons pop the off. Season 3 and 4 have a lot to live up to. Will they live up to it? Tune in next time to find out.